What would you do if your peaceful town turned into a nightmare overnight? Picture this, a tranquil small town where the most exciting thing to happen is the annual county fair. The kind of place where residents sleep soundly under the blanket of a starry night, safe in the knowledge that they know every face and every story in their tight-knit community. But, unbeknownst to these unsuspecting residents, something sinister was brewing in the heart of their town. Nestled away in the depths of a nondescript building was a laboratory. Here, under the cover of night, scientists were hard at work on a project so terrifying it's the stuff of nightmares. They were attempting to unlock the secrets of life and death itself, experimenting with a way to reanimate the deceased. In the sterile, cold environment of the lab, they toiled away, their hands handling the delicate instruments of their trade, their eyes reflecting the eerie green glow of their computer screens. Their intentions may have been pure, a quest for knowledge, a desire to conquer death. But as they say, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. As they delved deeper into their experiment, they unknowingly unleashed a virus, a contagion they could not control. This virus was not like the ones we're used to hearing about. No, this one didn't just make you sick, it had the ability to bring the dead back to life. The virus spread, invisible and insidious, seeping into the town like a slow-acting poison. It tainted the air, the water, and the very essence of the town, staining the once tranquil atmosphere with an impending sense of doom. Unaware of the horrors that awaited them, the townsfolk continued their lives, blissfully ignorant of the storm that was about to hit. And then, the corpses started to move. Imagine waking up to the sight of the dead walking. A chill runs down your spine as you grasp the reality of the situation. The town cemetery, once a place of eternal rest, is now a breeding ground for the undead. Under the cloak of darkness, the corpses began to stir, the soil shifted, and hands protruded from the graves, clawing their way to the surface. One by one, bodies rose from their eternal slumber, joining forces with a growing army of the undead. The sight was something straight out of a horror movie, only this was real, and it was happening in our once peaceful town. At first, the townspeople thought it was some elaborate prank. After all, who would believe in the dead rising? But as they drew closer, the horrifying truth dawned upon them. This was no trick. The dead were indeed walking. Their bodies were a grotesque sight to behold. Decaying flesh hung loosely from their bones, stained with the crimson hue of fresh blood. Their eyes, once a window to the soul, now carried an eerie lifelessness that chilled you to the bone. Their faces, pale and gaunt, told a tale of a life once lived, now lost in the clutches of death. The realization hit the townspeople like a freight train. Their disbelief turned into terror. They tried to flee, but the zombie horde was everywhere. The quiet streets of the town were no longer safe. They were filled with the undead, their haunting moans echoing through the night. The once tranquil town was now stained with blood. The screams of the terrified residents echoed from every corner, a chilling reminder of the nightmare they were living. But this was just the beginning. The dead had risen, and they were walking among us. The screams echoed from every corner, but the nightmare had just begun. In the face of such terror, what would the town's people do? The town's leader, a man of grit and determination, found himself grappling with a horrifying reality. The once serene town was now a stage for a gruesome spectacle. The leader, driven by his duty, rallied his people, urging them to stand their ground. His voice echoed through the town, a beacon of hope challenging the growing cacophony of terror. With the courage of a lion, he led his people not in retreat but in resistance. The town's people, their hearts filled with fear but their spirits ignited by their leader's determination, found strength they didn't know they had. The leader's efforts to protect his people were tireless. He coordinated defenses, fortified homes, and planned escape routes, but as the night grew darker, so did their predicament. The zombie army multiplied, their decaying bodies casting eerie shadows under the moonlight. The once picturesque town was now a battlefield, and every corner held a new horror. The townspeople fought back, their cries of defiance mingling with the blood-curdling screams echoing from the houses. Yet, there was a sense of unity, a shared determination to survive. The zombies, however, proved relentless. They pursued the living with a hunger that was insatiable, their lifeless eyes reflecting the horror they instilled. The leader, witnessing the escalating horror, felt the weight of his people's lives on his shoulders. He saw their desperation, their helplessness. It was a sight that would break any man, but not him. He stood tall, his resolve unwavering. The townspeople, inspired by their leader's strength, refused to yield. They fought not just for their survival but for their town, their home. Their resistance was a testament to the human spirit, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. Their battle was far from over, but they were not alone. They had their leader, their beacon of hope guiding them through the darkness. And they had each other, their shared resolve forming an unbreakable bond. The leaders and the survivors knew they had to fight back, and fight back they did. When faced with the horror they've created, where would the scientists be? Imagine the guilt that would gnaw at the minds of these men and women of science. They had sought to push the boundaries of knowledge, to challenge the very laws of life and death. Yet their creation had spiraled out of control. A terrifying, unstoppable force that had once been confined within the sterile walls of their laboratory was now unleashed upon the town they called home. The once bustling lab had been transformed into a ghostly shell of its former self, silent, vacant. The eerie hum of abandoned machinery was the only testament to the monstrous experiment that had taken place here. The scientists who should have been at their posts, grappling with the disaster they had set in motion, were nowhere to be found. The town's leader, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, led a group of survivors to the lab's doorstep. They had hoped to find answers, a solution perhaps, to the nightmare that had gripped their town. But what greeted them was an empty echo of their worst fears. As they stepped into the lab, their hearts pounded in their chests. The sterile air carried a chill that seeped into their bones, a stark reminder of the cold, unfeeling science that had birthed the horrors outside. They moved through the lab, their footsteps echoing in the silence, passing by vacant workstations and abandoned equipment. The lab, once a symbol of progress and innovation, now stood as a monument to a terrifying mistake. The leader and the survivors searched for any sign of the scientists, any clue that could help them fight back. But all they found was emptiness, a chilling void where responsibility once resided. The scientists, the architects of this horror, had vanished. Perhaps overwhelmed by guilt, perhaps in fear of the consequences of their actions, they had disappeared into the night. They had left behind the terror they had unleashed, a terror that now roamed the streets of their town, hunting the very people they had sworn to protect. How does one survive in a town overrun by zombies? The answer, with great difficulty and even greater courage. You see, the townspeople were not warriors. They were ordinary folk, caught in an extraordinary nightmare. Yet their will to survive sparked a bravery within them that they never knew they possessed. At every corner the zombie horde lurked, their lifeless eyes glowing in the dark, watching, waiting. Every step the survivors took was a gamble, every heartbeat a ticking time bomb, yet they pressed on, their will to live pushing them past their fear. They ran, they hid, they fought. Mothers shielded their children, fathers turned into warriors, friends became comrades. Their homes, once a sanctuary, now became their fortresses. Bars and planks hastily nailed to doors and windows, every possible entry point fortified. The once bustling town square was now a strategic meeting point. The survivors huddled together, planning, preparing, but the zombies were relentless. They pursued the living with an eeriness that made your skin crawl. The survivors' every move was shadowed, their every whisper heard. The undead had the advantage of numbers and they used it well. The escape attempts were fraught with danger. Every plan was a Hail Mary, every strategy a desperate hope. They moved under the cover of darkness, a ghostly procession against the backdrop of their once peaceful town. The air was thick with tension, the silence punctuated only by the occasional moan of a zombie or the stifled cry of a terrified child. Yet, despite the odds, the townspeople persevered. They fought, not just for their lives but for their town, for their way of life. They refused to let their home become a zombie playground. Their struggle was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity. Their courage was a beacon in the darkness, their resilience a testament to the human spirit. Their struggle was a chilling reminder of the thin line between life and death, between peace and chaos. In the darkness of the night, the once peaceful streets of the town were lost in a nightmare filled with blood and screams.